So what would it sound like if I tuned the overtones of the Harmonic series into equal temperament? Hello everybody and welcome to True North Audio. I am Kiko. It's been a while since I've done one of these videos. I've been working on a lot of other things lately, and even on this end, I'll start the idea of a video and realize it's a lot bigger project than I thought. And this kind of actually comes from one of those, or a couple of those. I've been working on trying to put together a good video for the Harmonic series and one for additive synthesis. And in putting together material for that, I have created this VCV rack sort of patch that you see here. I have it open in Logic because I own VCV. If you don't own VCV but still want to use it as a plugin, you can use the Cardinal, I believe is what it's called. But I own it and I have it working here in Logic, if you are curious why that is working. Basically what I did here is I took 64 oscillators and I used a Harmonic series calculator and tuned them to the first 64 steps of the Harmonic series. So I've got this kind of additive synthesis thing going on here. And it's a pretty basic setup. It's lots and lots of little oscillators, but it's really only a couple of actual modules. I've got these splitters just to kind of not have to drag the cables around too much, but it's oscillators into this mixer so I can control the level of each one. And then the mixers all kind of get combined into this mixer, which is my output. And then I have an envelope here, which is triggering the mixer up here into the output. All pretty straightforward, and I'll have this patch available for you all to download later on as well. So as you can hear, it's kind of got that like buzzy additive synthesis thing going on. This is a pretty straightforward slope. I don't off the top of my head know the formula to get like a sawtooth wave. It's something similar to this, but it's more exponential, I believe is the word. But yeah, essentially I just turned down 1 dB per channel, but there's definitely kind of a parabolic thing going on if you're trying to get a sawtooth, as I remember. But you essentially get like that really basic, and part of the reason it sounds so simple is also because there are only 64 steps, you know, whereas like a better sounding synth will probably have more overtones to it. But it's all sine waves, all tuned, and then just all stacked on top of each other. But I thought, what if I took this and sort of tuned all of the oscillators that are not in tune to equal temperament into equal temperament? And so I have this. And what you see here, you've got all these black and white modules. And all these black modules, these are the ones where the frequency that they were set to is different from the frequency that they would be set to, their nearest note in equal temperament. And the calculator I used has a pretty handy feature where it just told me, here's the frequency, here's the note that it's closest to, here is the octave that's in, and here is how many cents it is flat or sharp. And I realized it's not quite so simple to actually get the frequencies above the ones that I could find. So like most of these are, you know, in the 8th octave and stuff, and I have the frequencies for the 8th octave, but everything here is in the 9th octave. And I thought it'd be simple to just look up, you know, what D9, what the frequency of D9 is, but I wasn't finding anything, and so I actually had to kind of deconstruct it, because while it is equal temperament, I'm too far from the computer to see what buttons I'm pressing. If it is equal temperament, then you would think being 12 even steps, so you would just kind of take the frequency between the octaves and divide it by 12, but it doesn't quite work like that. So I had to work out this formula. I suck at math. Whatever the formula is supposed to be is basically just gibberish to me. I can't read that stuff, so I kind of had to like sit down and problem solve it by myself and figure it out. I basically figured out that I had to figure out the difference between, say, C2 and D2. I had to divide C2 by that difference, and whatever number that gave me, that was going to give me this X value that I have written down all kind of along here. And then I could take C9, the frequency of C9 here, divide it by each of these different numbers, and that would give me the difference between C9 and whatever other note I'm trying to reach. And then I would add that difference to the original frequency, and that gives me all these frequencies for the notes above C9. And that was a bit of a headache, and I could have gone back and I could have just tuned everything to lower frequencies so that like that top half was all just in the 8th octave, but it was a bit kind of too late for that by this point. So yeah, I ended up just going through all that. That's a whole thing too. What you'll see here is that most of these have been changed, and the further along you get, the more of these are going to end up being the same note. So if I play it here, you can kind of hear it's a little bit odd. And part of what's going on is because some of these are the same note. Sometimes you get 2, even 3, and then by the time you get to the bottom, there's even a couple places where there are 4 oscillators that are all tuned to the same frequency now, because all 4 of them are basically close enough to that one note. And that kind of creates a reinforcing of those specific notes, whereas other notes only have 1 or 2 in that same kind of range, and they're not as amplified. So you create a little bit of a strange experience there. This last one you can see is kind of an off black, and the reason for that is because this one was changed, but this is the only one that's still actually using a frequency that's in the original Harmonic series, and that's because this one is actually the same frequency as C10 here. So I have 2 oscillators playing C10. Now, the thing about Equal Temperament is that in being in tune, as we've kind of decided that it is the sort of imperfect compromise standard so that all instruments can play with each other, it's actually not in tune. And if you listen to the lower frequency notes, you can kind of hear that like weird sort of FM, like it sounds kind of like when you create an FM patch, but the operator is just sort of a like fixed frequency rather than a moving pitch. That's kind of what it sounds like to me, at least. But you can hear that kind of weird overtone too. And if I close this out and I'll switch between the two, you kind of get... You can tell it's not a huge difference, but it just doesn't sound right. It's kind of cursed, I'm not gonna lie. So I was talking about this with some people, and I kind of had the idea that it might have a good kind of like a liminal sound, like it's familiar but it feels kind of unresolved and incomplete. Something's sort of wrong with it. So I created a little kind of loop here of these sort of liminal chords, hitting the wrong keys. Created this sort of loop here of these different chords, and figured I'd put it through this patch. The problem, of course, is that there are 64 oscillators, and my computer doesn't like that a whole lot in mono, but when you're doing like a 4-voice polyphony, I basically just had to bounce it. So it's an audio file. I can't really mess with it much. And you could filter that out and kind of lower it in the background, just have that as like a kind of weird sort of tension. It's a little bit clipped. The audio ended up actually being a little bit too loud on that first mixer in the patch, and I kind of just left the crackling in because of the nature of what I was trying to do. But if you listen to both of these played together, you actually get a real feel for the difference that's going on. And if I pan this, say pan the natural harmonics left and the equal temperament right, you can kind of hear... You can hear the difference between the two in your left and right ear. And it's kind of fascinating. And you'll notice too that the equal temperament is louder, and that's because of the stacking frequencies I was talking about earlier, where multiple oscillators are now playing the same note instead of individual frequencies. So you do lose a little bit of definition in that as well, but it kind of amplifies a few of the notes and overall makes the patch just a tiny bit louder, so it's a bit unbalanced as well. Now, it's not necessarily something you're always going to notice either. The track I've had kind of playing in the background here and that sort of introed this video is actually using a version of this patch. I took this same patch and just turned off all of the even harmonics to give it kind of a triangle wave type sound. Turned down the envelope so it's more of just a pluck and added some reverb. And when you kind of obscure it like that, it's not as obvious that there's something wrong with it. So it's kind of one of those things where you're probably not going to notice it until you notice it or until it's been pointed out, except in some of those low frequencies. Like I said, those are kind of noticeably odd. But it was just a fascinating little experiment that came to mind as I've been working on these other videos on harmonic series and additive synthesis. And I'm going to do more with this patch for the additive synthesis video, and I'm probably going to set it up so that I can do like weird processing on the pan of every individual harmonic or whatever. The idea originally, the reason I created this was to see like if I could create a patch that gave me super sort of granular control over the harmonic series in a very like kind of over the top additive synthesis kind of way. But I thought I'd make this video just to show you what would happen if I took a bunch of those oscillators and tuned them to equal temperament. Hopefully you found that interesting or fascinating. And like I said, I'm going to have the patch in the video below if you want to try it out for yourself or do weird stuff with it. And let me know if you have any other ideas for things you might want to hear. I definitely plan on kind of playing with this just a little bit more. It was one of those little unexpected kind of adventure audio, just kind of you're on the journey and it takes you someplace you didn't expect it to, and it's kind of interesting and fascinating. Until next time.